Tom, over to you.
Yeah, if everyone can mute their mics, please. Thank you.
Right.
So I think we're almost there. Welcome, everyone. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really delighted to welcome you to this virtual town hall event on the future of peace in Nigeria. My name's Tom Cargill. I'm the Chief Executive of Wilton Park. Just to explain a little bit about who we are and why we're hosting this event today. Wilton Park is an executive agency of the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office here in the UK, and we've been organising policy dialogue such as this since 1946, and in fact this is our 75th anniversary this year. It was created as an initiative inspired by Prime Minister Winston Churchill to support the development of democracy and a democratic system in Germany and Europe after the Second World War. Since then, we've gradually expanded our remit, and now we organise events on issues all around the world, but particularly looking at addressing conflict, ensuring peace and stability and prosperity, security around the world. By all means, please do have a look at our website to see all the breadth of topics that we're covering. Until the terrible pandemic that we're going through at the moment, most of our events were held at our residential venue in southeast England, but we've been increasingly organising events around the world, including across Africa. As I say, we're an executive agency of the Foreign Office in the UK, and this means that although we're part of the Foreign Office, we're also a part. We are a part of it, but we're apart from it, and we benefit greatly from the advice and support from the Forest. But we're not diplomats of the Foreign Office ourselves, and our sole purpose is to provide a platform for unofficial, informal discussions on issues of importance to the UK. So just about a few words about this series. We organised an in-person event in Abuja 3 years ago, and we addressed an analysis of peace-building challenges in Nigeria and gave an overview of how many of the stakeholders, government, international community and civil society were responding to these challenges. And while we hope to host events again in the not too distant future in person, we wanted to provide an opportunity to maintain the momentum from this and other events in the past today. So this series has brought leading experts, scholars, practitioners and policymakers together to assess the changing dynamics of conflict and the ways in which African peace-building actors have been responding to these challenges to sustain civil society engagement in peace building and understand how to build more effective interaction between African and global peace building. Finally, I should thank the Carnegie Corporation for their support for this work, and also our partners, APN and the African Leadership Centre, for all of the fruitful, rewarding collaboration over the years. So I will now turn over the microphone to our good friend Funmi Olanasakin, founding member of the African Leadership Centre and Vice President and Vice Principal of International and Professor of Security, Leadership and Development at King's College London. So over to you, Funmi, and thank you very much again for working with us on this important event.
Tom, thank you very much. Let me start by saying warm greetings to our colleagues, but especially our distinguished guests this afternoon. His Excellency, Dr. John Kayode Fayemi, Governor of Ekiti State, Excellency, Governor of Sokoto State, Governor Tambuwal. It's a great pleasure to have you here. We were meant to have the Governor of Borno State. Unfortunately, he's been called away at very short notice, and he will be sending one of his representatives, and as soon as they log on, I will warmly welcome them as a representative of the governor. But I also want to especially thank our colleagues and co-collaborators, I almost said co-conspirators in a sense, of course, in the business of peace building. Titi Lope Ajayi is here. I recognize Fakria Hashim Abdallah, one of our own fellows at the African Leadership Center, but I want to warmly welcome someone that I have not seen in a long time, Professor Egosa Osagai, who's the director of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, the Director General. It's nice to have you here and to see you again. Without further ado, one of the things I will be moderating this afternoon's event, and we would move rapidly. It's going to be a discussion. I will talk more about that later, but I'm really grateful to my friend and brother, His Excellency, Governor Kayode Fayemi, who agreed to give us opening remarks. I will first go to him for his opening remarks before we then move on to the other participants. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Fumi, for your introductory remarks. Your Excellency, my brother, the Governor of Sokoto State, distinguished participants at this Wilton Park Town Hall virtual meeting on the future of peace. Let me say how delighted I am to be here to participate in this town hall meeting. This is not only because of the relevance of today's topic to our own current situation in Nigeria, but because of the situation and trends in our region and in the world today. The pursuit of peace is not in any way the preserve of any one country or region. It is an urgent global concern. And two things stand out about today's topic, in my humble opinion. First is the focus on peace, which offers a different and broader lens from within which to discuss the multidimensional challenges that face us in the world today, which is a typical focus on security does not always enable us to do. To be sure, peace and security are two sides of the same coin. But a focus on peace moves us away from the hard security issues which tend to be limiting because it is sometimes accompanied by conflictual and adversarial dimensions, even when we seek to offer solutions. It therefore enables us to shift our frame by focusing on peace. This expands our thinking, yet it invariably provides a pathway to our collective security. It also broadens the constituency of actors involved in conversations of peace. It seamlessly connects people across disciplines and other divides. The second thing that stands out about today's topic, in my view, and which is somewhat unique, is its focus on the future. In the fast-moving and challenging environment of the everyday, particularly during a pandemic, and when we're responding in real time to simultaneously occurring crises, it is difficult to think on the spot about the distant future. Yet it is vitally important to envision a peaceful future for our society, for our state and region, and a future in which Nigeria's place in the world is assured, where its people live united and prosperous. Visioning is an essential part of leadership. visioning about the future of peace in Nigeria enables us to broaden a conversation beyond the usual voice at the table to a much wider audience, across generational divides and among the diversities of our people. It especially enables us envision how the world around us will have changed in the future and to locate ourselves in that change and envision the opportunities as well as the challenges ahead. Then we invariably return to where we are today to chart a roadmap that takes us from here to the peaceful future that we envision. In some cases, we may even find that thinking together beyond today's experiences provides different ideas and approaches to the challenges of today. Finally, convening a range of voices that do not often have an opportunity to participate in conversations about peace and the aspirations of the people across the region about the attainment of peace and development is wholeheartedly commendable. It is therefore a pleasure to welcome participants from across Nigeria and the rest of Africa to this virtual town hall. It is an opportunity to discuss a range of perspectives, for example, on how COVID-19 will impact approaches to peace going forward, the impact of the wider Sahel region, now regarded as ungoverned in many cases, and the implications for peace, and the transformations of peace among Nigeria's next generation. I welcome you all to this meeting and wish you a very fruitful deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Excellency, Dr. Kayode Fayemi. It's a pleasure to have you here amongst us. Many of you, many of us recall that this is your own field of study, first and foremost, but it has also now become an area of engagement for you in so many ways. Without further ado, let me say a few words about how this afternoon session will be organized. We want to have a conversation amongst ourselves, and we want things to flow seamlessly. We want those who do not typically have access to roundtables, to spaces where questions of peace and security are being discussed, to focus on peace fundamentally this afternoon. And so there are three things I want to highlight before I call on His Excellency, the Governor of Sokoto State, to give us his own first remarks. First, really, these are some of the ground rules. We want to really have a broad, wide-ranging discussion around peace itself, what it means from both a personal and societal perspective. And each individual participating in this conversation this afternoon will be reflecting from the point of view of their own immediate context and their broad-ranging experiences. So peace is at the center of it because conceptually the moment, and I think Governor Fayemi has framed this precisely, because it broadens the sorts of issues, the range of issues we can discuss around peace. Second thing has to do with the notion of the future. The notion of a future really means we can dream, but envision more realistically where we think that our society is moving towards, where we would like to be in a decade or two from now. It gives us the freedom to really innovate about our own place in society as a people, but certainly as a broader region and as a country as a whole. And I think it takes us to the next issue around next generation. The whole theme of our series of seminars all this while, and I think Tom probably alluded to that a little bit, is around the question of next generation and next generation's role in peace building. And so I see an intergenerational conversation taking place this afternoon as well. So how are we going to proceed? I would want a situation where each of our speakers leads a discussion for a few minutes. So once we have the remarks from the Governor of Sokoto State, I'll call on our other speakers to give us your own opening statements, as it were, your vision statement in terms of how you see peace in a decade from now. If you want to move to 2 decades from now, that is also fine. But I'll come back to that question as soon as we hear from His Excellency, the Governor of Sokoto State, Governor Tambuwal. Please, I'm trying to see my camera. I think you're there. Yes, there you are. Thank you so very much. It's very nice to have you here. Thank you for taking the time to come to this program. Please, over to you with a few remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much for me. Nice seeing you. And with the best of regards from the good people of Sokoto State to all of you on this platform. Even though I'm speaking from the top hill of Ado-Ekiti this afternoon, where I'm being hosted by my brother, the Governor of Ekiti State and Chairman of the Nigeria Governors Forum on a colloquium that we have just finished. Thank you, Tom, for your insight on the history of Wilton Park, and thank the whole Wilton Park management for inviting me through my brother, the Governor of Ekiti State, Kayode Fayemi. I appreciate this very rare opportunity and privilege of being on this very important platform. What I read from the communication from this great Wilton Park platform is that we are to talk about future of peace in Nigeria. I believe that we, by so doing, are engaging in a conversation that is talking about what becomes of Nigeria from now going forward. Because Nigeria, as of today, is a troubled nation. We are facing a lot of problems and challenges, starting from the issues in the Northeast, the problems in the Northwest, is North Central, and the challenges in the North, in the Southeast, South, and of course, where we are and where I'm speaking from, the Southwestern Nigeria. So the entire country is engulfed in one form of security challenge or the other, and we're all in search of peace. And of course, we know that without peace, there cannot be any development. Without peace, you cannot even come out of a house, not to talk of undertaking any endeavor. So the future of peace is a very, very important conversation that we should have. And we have seen from the recent problems and challenges we've had with NSAS protests in Nigeria, how the next generation is reacting and responding to some of the challenges we are facing in this country. And going forward, peace is very important in not only bring about development, but even in the survival of the country itself. So how I vision the future of peace in Nigeria is that as a people, as individuals, first, we must agree amongst ourselves from our innermost selves that we need peace with ourselves. As individuals, you need peace in your family. You need peace in your village. You need peace in your local government area, your state, and the entirety of the Federation of Nigeria for us to achieve anything, for us to be able to live together, for us to be able to realize our dreams, either as young men or as leaders of any level in Nigeria. So I believe that we need to be talking more about what the future portends without peace. Just imagine a situation whereby these crises, as they are, continue unabated for the years to come, for another decade, without peace. What will happen? But if you take it on the flip side, if there is peace from your home, in your local government area, in your village, in the country, what is the future going to look like? What is it that's going to make, how is Nigeria going to progress? So that underscores the significance of this topic and what we are discussing today. And I agree wholly with what Governor Kayode said about this topic and how relevant and how germane and how important it is going forward. So for me, for now, this is my opening remarks. We need peace in Nigeria. We need to be at peace with our humble selves for us to even have a conversation with one another.
Thank you so very much, Excellency. It's good to have you here, and you have just led the way in raising a couple of things for us to consider. How the next generation is responding to the challenges we have in the country. As individuals, we must agree that we need peace with ourselves. So peace with ourselves at the lowest level of relationship, starting with the family. And I believe in a sense, if we extrapolate from that, peace amongst ourselves across society. And of course, we move into the state-society relationships as well. So if there is peace, which actually you qualified that, if there is peace, what will the future look like? And in a sense, part of our strategy this afternoon was to move us away a little bit from everyday conversations around the insecurities that we feel, not because they're not important, they're fundamentally important. And as the governor of Sokoto just alluded to, we have challenges in our environment. But we are therefore starting with an assumption that if we assume that those challenges are resolved, what will that peace that comes about as a result of resolving those issues look like? And we're trying to take us away from a situation in which we're really disagreeing about the ways in which to go forward at country level, at regional level, on a daily basis, and we project a little bit into the future. If we're looking at 2030 and we're looking at 2040, and we assume that we have managed to resolve these really thorny issues at the time. What does the picture look like for Nigeria, for Nigerians, for the region that we're part of? That's actually what we're trying to talk about in order to work our way back, as Governor Fayemi was saying, work our way back to move, to look at today and what we need to do to get to that vision of the future. So if we're looking at the vision of that future, what I'd like to do, and I'll come to you after I've heard from one of our colleagues, Professor Osage. I'll come to you after I've heard from Dr. Titi Ajayi, and I would like to pose to you, first and foremost, Titi, please offer your opening statement in response, already thinking about some of what you have heard. Titi, over to you.
Thank you, Prof. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Titi.
How many minutes do I have, please?
If you take, say, why don't we go in cycles of 2 minutes or so? We're trying to continue. There will be several questions for us to reflect on. An opening statement of 2 minutes, and then we'll come back over and over again on the kinds of questions that emerge. All right?
Okay. Yeah. All right, thank you. And thank you to the organizers for inviting me. I guess for me, seeing that the theme of the panel is looking at the future of peace, how we can do things differently, what needs to change in order for us to get from where we are to where we envision that we could be. For me, would be, if I look from the perspective of women and women's involvement in peace building, would focus on greater inclusivity and greater representation of women at all levels of peace building. To summarize, what we find is that there's a disconnect between the very crucial work that a lot of Nigerian women are doing at community levels across Nigeria, not just in the Northeast, and women's continued exclusion from state-led formal processes. So for example, if you look across the different counter-terror, counterinsurgency and conflict management strategies and policies, you find that women are only mentioned in one section of the counter-terror strategy, and that mention is a passing reference to women who have been affected by conflict and their need for rehabilitation and for support. You don't find any acknowledgement in there of the diverse roles that women have played throughout the conflict, the multiple ways in which women are engaging in peace building on the ground in communities that are worst affected by conflict, of the agency that these women have and the kinds of transformations that they are bringing about. So for me, a key priority from the women's perspective going forward would be, how do we get more women involved? How do we better leverage the experiences, the knowledge, and the different relationships that women bring to the table when we have these conversations about peace? Thank you.
The agency of women at the core of this. So if we moved to the next 10 years, for example, if we zoomed forward, some of the issues you're talking about now should not be the order of the day anymore. We should have a situation in which in Nigeria, across the region, women's agency is naturally recognized. Someone was asking me the other day about the reason why in other parts of the world we see a lot, more younger women in leadership, at the level of the state, at the level of governance across society. You find women, younger women. You only need to look to New Zealand and see the patterns that I imagine. So let's reflect on this, not immediately, but later on, to begin to think about what that terrain, what does the Nigerian landscape look like 10 years from now, if some of those issues you've just talked about have been resolved. But let me leave that for a moment and move to Professor Sagad to give us a few words. Fakria, I'm saving you for later. And I'm so sorry, I forgot to introduce Titi Lope fully. Titi Lope Ajayi is a research consultant with specialisms in gender, conflict, security and civil society and civic space. Her current work, sponsored by the African Peacebuilding Network, one of the partners on this program, centers on women and terror in Africa, with a focus on the gender dynamics of the displacement the crisis produced by the Boko Haram conflict, and the intersections of national and global frameworks on women, peace and security. She's held previous appointments in various places, including with the International Crisis Group. Her resume is quite substantive, and rightly so. So Titi, welcome. Thank you for being here. Reflect on that question for a moment whilst I go to Professor Osagie, who needs no introduction as the Director General of the Nigerian Institute for International Affairs. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you, Sister Fumi. I think that, Professor Governor Kayode Fayemi has helped to set the tone for the kinds of discussions we should be having in terms of the location of peace itself. There is a global dimension, a regional dimension, apart from the state dimension. So 10 years down the line, 20 years, whatever we envision, would not be a Nigerian experience only. It's a Nigeria that is encapsulated within larger frameworks. So as we search for peace in Nigeria, as we envision peace in Nigeria, we should also envision peace in these other spaces. The thing is, I particularly like peace and future peace because it helps to redirect how we think. If, for instance, we had convened this meeting to talk about insecurity, many of the things that we are talking about would be more difficult to imagine or even to dream about. That said, I think that, futuristic scenario building in itself is very helpful. But, it takes off from where we are. And that where we are is the location that I started with, which in this instance has to be Nigeria. What are the variables, what are the kinds of expressions, what are the kinds of manifestations that we expect to see. I think the first thing, which is conceptually profound, is to say that peace is not going to mean the end of conflicts, it's not going to mean the end of insecurity, it's not going to mean the end of all the problems that we have. It would only mean that we have a more enabling environment, a more favorable environment for addressing the kinds of issues that beset the state. And first and foremost, therefore, I like to say that 10 years down the line, I like to see a Nigeria where issues are resolved through non-military means. Issues are resolved not through force or coercion, but issues are resolved through civil engagement. And people are able to talk about inclusivity in the most profound sense, a peace culture that is based on the culture of rights, that people have their rights, individual rights, social rights, economic rights, political rights, and that all of these rights, are able to be not only articulated, but actually expressed. So there is effective participation. I'd like to see, in another 10, 20 years, in addition to this, a more constitutionally stable environment, the one that would have addressed issues of state structuration, so that the country can have the benefit, that come with the open society. So that peace, would be inclusive, would be non-violent, would be non-military, would be rights-based, would be one that affords everyone the optimal space to pursue their things in a sense that allows for greater autonomy and a sense of self-determination. Self-determination that would mean overall that we have a country that we can call our own, a country in which every segment, every group, every generation finds itself and is therefore able to participate in the decision-making process, so that the notion, the concept of national interest, the concept of what drives the country as a people will be one on which there is consensus. Consensus not meaning that we will not have disagreements, but there would be substantial consensus. And I think that all of that would be the dream that Nigeria has, because these things would almost, if you like, inevitably translate into greater economic prosperity. And when Nigeria prospers, West Africa prospers. And when West Africa prospers, Africa prospers. I see that this is a connectedness, that would make up for peace in Nigeria in the future. But finally, let me say that it is the youth of our country, the very young people today that would in another 10, 20 years be saddled with the ownership of this country. And each time I go into the social media space and I find the kinds of exchanges that are going on there, I'm worried myself, because it seems to me that we need to have a more enlightened youth. We need to have a more nationally conscious youth. We need to have a youth that is aware and conscious of his responsibilities for the future of the country. So that would be my entry point. I'd like to thank the Wilton Park for this opportunity, and I hope that the search for peace will remain a continuous one. Thank you, Sister.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. You have taken us even further. You've laid the ground. And I will want to come back another time once we've had the first round of conversations, because really, I want to read, you have taken us from where the governors started, the two governors started. You've even built into your conversation this whole notion of gender equity by talking about culture of rights. But to highlight a couple of things that you have mentioned, it will not mean the end of conflict and that the problems we have will go away. Absolutely. It's one of the things I like about peace discourse, because in a sense, it allows us to look at our aspirations collectively, individually and collectively, and locate where we are, which is what you've done so brilliantly. Locate where we are and begin to envision a different kind of future that connects all of us, that brings all of us together, and actually really literally diverts our own approach to the conflict. Conflict is so inevitable as a part of human interaction. And so the idea that it's only one tool in the box to deal with conflict, which is military or which is a violent approach, you have brilliantly dealt with that. A more favorable environment where issues are resolved through non-military means. I want to underscore that. And in that respect, what we've tried to do along the way is to first express our visions of peace. I will come back with some more direct questions after that. Last but not least is our own student, our fellow. I left you last so that I'm not partial in any way to African Leadership Center fellows, but Fakria, I want to introduce Fakria. And you see how I'm introducing the next generation, and I don't do that with well-established people already. It's part of the business of intergenerational conversations that as you bring the next generation to the stage, you also position them to be able to have the conversation that they're about to have. So I'm really proud to introduce Fakria Hashim Abdallah, who holds a bachelor's degree in finance from Abu Dhabi University, where she worked as, for a tech company for a while. So the issue of technology and how you use this space she's no stranger to it. She's currently a Peace, Security and Development Early Career Fellow at the African Leadership Center. She's worked for NGOs such as Girl Child Concerns in the conflict-ridden Borno State on SDGs, as well as the Nigerian Vice Presidency on Social Programs Delivery. She pioneered proudly the exploding conversation on sexual violence in northern Nigeria through the Arewa Me Too, which drew inspiration from the global Me Too movement. She also founded the North Normal campaign, hashtag all of this, hashtag Arewa Me Too, hashtag Me Too movement, hashtag North Normal campaign to spotlight the sexual and gender-based violence policy implications in Nigeria. She's a founding member of the Feminist Coalition at the forefront of the response to the EndSARS protests in Nigeria. Her research interests include local economic development and governance, climate conflict, and feminist structural response to SGBV in Nigeria. Fakria, you are no doubt the youngest member of this roundtable. Can you pronounce to us first what your vision is in a few minutes for the next, in 10 years' time? What is your vision for Nigeria?
Thank you so much for having me join all of you distinguished people doing incredible things in your sectors. Definitely people I look up to, like my boss, Professor Fumi. My vision for the future of peace, and I would say I saw that gleaming very brightly during the EndSARS protests, when we saw a united front of young people standing up for their rights, for their human security. That was before the lights went out, but it showed us what was possible for young people to achieve, to have a seat at the table, to actually steer that table, because no doubt, I do believe, and I'm not being biased, that young Nigerians are some of the brightest in the entire world. I mean, we can see sectors where we're not necessarily expected that level of dependence on the state or young people are just innovating. And even when it comes to conflict issues, some of the most effective strategies we've seen in local communities fostering peace have had young people at the forefront of addressing many issues. The Feminist Coalition is really one of them that came out of nowhere and organized this massive national protest in a way that we really had never seen before, without posing as the all-rounded leadership of the entire movement. So I think when I think of the future of peace in Nigeria, I see the acceptance of our diversity, because one of the most critical issues that comes up every single time when we're discussing national issues is the differences of our tribes, of our religions, which hinder conversations from moving forward. So and seeing well, the state not exploit, those loopholes in conversations to further divide. So being able to just move beyond those differences is really one step towards peace in general, because what we see in the news, in the media today, is really just dominated by all of which divides us, North from South, Muslim from Christians, and all of these other very distinct marginalized groups across Nigeria, and very much what we see in other West African spaces. So the future of peace for me is about allowing young people to innovate their ways out of problems and becoming globally competitive that we see now, not in spite of the state or the government, but having the state actually being a power house behind young people, because then a lot more can be done in the process. Thank you.
Fakria, thank you so much. And by the way, we can now open up for questions or comments and so on. My colleagues will filter through those questions and comments, and we'll keep bringing them on. I think, for me, I feel a sense of pride actually seeing us having a conversation. You said something that struck me, Fakria. As young people are innovating, that young people are at the forefront of addressing many issues. But this question of acceptance of difference, this question of young people being able to be at the table, all right, without violence. I mean, we're all conversing around peace and ambitions for our country. There is no violence going on, and it is possible to have these conversations and being around the same table. Today, we're around a virtual table. And this is striking for me because Governor Fayemi might remember some of this. We had been in different fora across the African continent where you'd find, elderly Africans remark. If Comfortero had been here, she would also remember. Just dismiss us in the late 90s as those young people. Don't even begin to listen to the nonsense that they're talking about. This was all about questions of peace and security in Africa. And then you look everywhere, even in youth, so-called youth meetings, you find people 60-something sitting in youth meetings. We used to joke about this in Sierra Leone. Or the idea that a young person, and by the way, when people talk about young person, they would be referring to me as young person, referring to even these governors that are here as young people. Wait your turn. It's not yet time for you. And there's also a gender dimension to it. The idea that you would find a Fakria or a Titi sitting in the same room as the governors, as official people in officialdom, is not something that any of us experienced ever without having the title of doctor or something behind your name. And I think Professor Sagai will remember all those 1999 meetings around the Nigerian Constitution and so on. So we're breaking down these barriers, and it's important that these barriers are broken down so that we can have an honest conversation amongst ourselves, and we do not have to agree. But it does not mean that every disagreement has to resolve in some really violent conversations or violent behavior towards each other. I want to appreciate that very much. And in moving, therefore, to the next set of comments, I am looking for questions before I then come back to pose a set of questions. I'm not sure I've seen anything yet, so I don't want to monopolize this. But as moderator, I will try so hard not to abuse the privilege that I have. And I want to go back, and by the way, if anyone wants to come in at any time, show of hands or just project your voice amongst the speakers and come in, I would say so. Now, having heard some of the stuff we've heard, a gem, there's a real gem in this. And I see that there's a conundrum. I know we have talked about we've had all these conversations around restructuring, around the security questions in Nigeria. They're not the immediate focus, not because they're not important, but because I think that there's some underlying issues, some causal factors that we don't pay attention to anymore because today's challenges, they occupy our minds necessarily so, and the space so much, they occupy the space of the conversation and they make the conversation toxic. But if we are therefore to talk about a non-militarized and a non-military Nigeria in that sense, where the people have this kind of consensus and where we can begin to talk about our own conflicts, the conflict sometimes that gets relegated, one of insecurity of women. Insecurity because they're marginalized in the ways that Titi Ajayi talked about. Insecurity because of sexual violence. And we've seen a lot of that during this COVID period. And I think these are real conditions that we need to begin to talk about. But I want to also highlight some of the things that we've just heard in terms of those other people who are marginalized. The fact that we see our leaders exploit loopholes in the conversation to further divide the country, because they are arguing, and this is an Africa-wide question, they are projecting and wanting to justify where they stand, and in the process, and actually some really look for that loophole to divide the conversation. We've seen it, and I can reel off 6 other countries where we see that kind of thing happen. So if what drives the people is to be based on consensus around questions of prosperity and equality, what therefore should we be looking at when we think of a next generation? And I'm going to start with you, still Fakria, and work my way backwards, because the argument that people make is that the young people are not monolithic, all right? Young people themselves are divided down the line on some of these issues we're talking about, on gender issues, for example, on class issues. How is it that the next generation, what should they be thinking about differently? And that when young people become older, they occupy space. When young people become older, they occupy space and behave exactly as these elderly people that we're talking about. I'm not counting myself amongst the elderly, by the way, and I'm not counting these governors amongst them. I will not refer to us as elderly. There's a layer still above us that we can count as elderly. Can you lead that conversation, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Prof. I believe it's perfectly okay for young people to not be monolithic. We all know that we're very different culturally, socially, religiously. We're very much aware of our diversity. It lies in our ability to actually explore a lot of these issues without descending into verbal violence that tend to escalate. And this tends to be the case. One of the previous speaker mentioned the deeds. You mentioned the the dark hole, which is social media. And as much as social media has all of these terrible faces to it, it has also been the greatest source of inclusivity for young people in different aspects of governance that actually affects them. Beyond social media, we have very little to no power on the actual political stage, but our ability to actually agree on certain things, agree that we all want better governance, we all want to feel secure in our homes, has allowed us to form clusters where we're empowered enough to take a stance against the government, or any government for that matter. So we do understand our diversity, and we are never going to always agree on everything. We are all guided by different ideologies, but it's really about how we're able to take advantage of our diversity and understand the issues that we have in common, which we've been able to do. For one, we felt insecurity we face from state instruments like the police was, something we were not going to continue to live with and be silent about. And we came out in our thousands, on social media in our millions, and the diasporans were there. Even non-Nigerians were very much part of the conversation. And whether or not that amounted to anything substantial in terms of change, that is really on us young people. That is on the government's choice to choose to express itself through the monopoly of violence. But I mean, there's so many issues that we face in many parts of the country, but we're able to find agreeable points. And even when we're not able to collectively agree on issues, we find circles that we fit into, and within those circles we're able to be loud enough to either talk about things or do what we can within our capacities to ensure that something shifts, which I think young Nigerians have done quite well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I will push you further later, but thank you for that. I want to go to Professor Osagai, and I now see that many questions have come in. I may have been looking in a different place, and I know you have to leave us before the other panelists. There are quite a few comments addressed to you. You don't have to answer, you don't have to respond, but there are a couple of questions that I'd like you to respond to before you leave, please. One says, in imagining and expanding our sense of future peace, in what ways does our conceptualization of the state have to evolve, if any? I think the professor amongst us who has clearly thought about some of this is best placed to answer it. By the way, the conversation so far has been found, to be insightful. The conflict management approaches. I want to find one more question to you, please. I think many things have been said, wonderful things have been said already. The infrastructure of peace in Nigeria is terribly lacking and underdeveloped, and it is security, not peace, that is heavily financed in Nigeria since independence. So, question is, how can the peace infrastructure in Nigeria be built and financed? For example, can our governors begin to change the security vote into peace votes? Professor Osagai, I would like you to respond to those two questions, that conceptualization of the state and the question of whether, how can the peace infrastructure in Nigeria be built and financed? It's broad. I would ask our governors in the closing remarks to make a few statements about this as well. Thank you so much.
I think, Professor, you have given, you know, what I consider to be the most brilliant, you know, way to go. Our governors should consider converting their security votes to peace votes. That is one way to go. But talking seriously, somebody says, what manner of state? You know, what manner of peace infrastructure? I mean, I think these things are very closely related. What manner of state? I mean, I was struck the other day reading a biography of Ben-Gurion titled "A State at Any Cost." Now, there is also something to say for a state of our own. A state of our own is one that is collectively owned by all citizens, or at least the constituencies that make up the state. Everyone has a space. Everyone is able to articulate, you know, trade them, you know, openly and free with, you know, it is not one that excludes people systematically. It's not one that marginalizes. It's not one that, you know, takes people to the fringes. We may not all be in the center, but we have to have our spaces. It is when we have those spaces that we can talk of a proper infrastructure for peace, a space that allows you to, you know, reflect on who you are, a space that allows you to do things in an autonomous way, in self-determined ways, and a space that says you can have the freedom, you know, to talk with other people. You are not fettered in any way. It's something that allows for continuous negotiation as young people, as women, as farmers, because you see, many times when we have these conversations these days, we forget people, the peasants, the farmers, and so on. Who's going to speak for them? When are they going to become part of this space? I mean, the things about, you know, the agrarian economy, you know, when are we going to factor these things in? So I think that is a state that, you know, would be our state, a state that is accountable, a state that is participatory, and a state that most of all, you know, thrives on the basis of the interests and well-being of citizens. The state must be able to deliver security. The state must be able to deliver peace. The state must make the spaces open for us. I think that all of these things are basic elements of not just infrastructure, but of a culture of peace.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you so very much. I think you said it, you're spot on about that. I have to say, someone from Jamiatul Rasul Association UK that was posing that sort of question. Professor Saga, I really, really appreciate the solid response that you have given. Let me go through a couple of questions some more, and I think Titi Ajayi, there was a question. How you know, about gender inclusive peace building. The question to you is, how do we address the problem of gender sensitivity in peace building? And I think it's, you know, it's an expansive question. You do not necessarily have to, you know, go too deeply into it, but maybe highlight one or two things. And I would like our governors to reflect in advance on this question. Someone says, this is Dr. Agoso Bamayi, says, I would love to hear what the opinion of the governors is on how women and youth in Nigeria can be empowered to be part of the peace structure going forward. But Titi, can you reflect on that question whilst I run through this? Are you okay, Titi? You're muted.
Sorry, I was looking at the question screen and trying to get back to the main screen. Thank you for the question. It is indeed a very important one. I will answer you by, first of all, looking at what happens when we have peace building that isn't gender sensitive. And there are just a few, there are a number of things, I'll mention just a few. So I started off by saying in my earlier remarks that there's a tendency within the ways in which conflict in the Northeast is being managed for women to be seen primarily as victims, whereas we know from research that women played multiple roles that far transcend just being victims. We also have the current situation, I would say, can be is determined by social norms and social practices and ideas that there are certain spaces and certain activities that are women. There are certain things that are appropriate for women, and similarly, there are certain things that are appropriate for men. And security happens to be one space in which you don't see a lot of women. They are not seen as belonging there. I would also link that to low levels of women's representation in politics, because this has a bearing on how women's issues are represented, whether they are represented, and what kinds of action is taken or not. And just to cite some statistics, in the whole of Nigeria's history, I stand to be corrected, we've had only one female governor, and she lasted 3 months. And if you look at women's representation in houses of our legislative houses, we are currently at 6% of women in the Senate, and I believe 5.2 or 5.4 for the lower house. And this puts us at the very low end of the indices of women's political representation, not just in Africa, but globally. And lastly is to highlight something that Prof. Shakin said, which is about high levels of sexual and gender-based violence. And this is happening both in and out of conflict. And there are multiple instances of this: sexual harassment and abuse of women within security sector institutions, sexual harassment and abuse of women by security actors, and also armed groups within the Boko Haram conflict. And a lot of the women who were abducted and abused by Boko Haram and other armed groups, and now they make up the majority of the women who are displaced across the Northeast. So how do we address these problems? There are a number of options. For me, the first and the most fundamental is that we address, there's been a lot of work that has been done on this, but my sense is that we've paid so much attention to structure, not enough to changing people's attitudes and people's mindsets. And this is where the real challenge lies. The idea that women are second-class citizens, women should always take a back seat to men. So I think for me, the first priority should be to address these mindsets. Where do they come from? What is it that is feeding and sustaining them? How can we evolve them into attitudes and into mindsets that are more positive and more progressive, and that are more, that recognize more the humanity of women and the equality between the sexes? So for me, that would be the first thing. And it's a major issue because I'm also seeing that there's some kind of pushback against gender rights and gender advocacy. And it's coming from faith-based organizations. So ideas about what is a good woman, whether you're a Muslim or a Christian, and just general moral norms about how women should behave and what is appropriate for women. So it's important that we prioritize this and we keep pushing back against it. I think the second thing would be then to prioritize the protection of women and girls from sexual and gender-based violence. We have the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Law, which, as far as I know, has not yet been adopted by any of the northern states. I stand to be corrected. So sometimes it's not that the policies are not in place, but they are not being implemented, or that key actors are not playing their roles or doing what needs to be done in order for those policies to be effective. We could use a lot more sexual assault referral centers. That's also a key priority. But again, it comes back to what I was saying about changing mindsets and attitudes. If we're talking about a future in which we resolve conflicts without using violence, we should also link to that the getting away from the idea that violence against women, violence against girls is okay, that it's a satisfactory way of resolving a conflict or settling a grudge or solving a problem. And for me, the last thing would be to be intentional about including women in state-led processes. I saw a question also about how who should take the lead in getting us to this future of peace that we envisage. There's responsibilities on both sides. There are women, like I said earlier, who are doing very vital work, and then the state is doing its own thing. But a lot of the work that the state is doing is not gender sensitive. So there needs to be intentional inclusion of women and leveraging of their knowledge and their information and the various relationships and networks that they have within communities, so that we're able to put right some of the wrongs that have brought us to where we are today. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive response, Titi. I think it's clear there's a mindset question. It's not the policies or the laws, a mindset question that allows us to see each other as equal citizens and not think about the gender difference or the age difference or the religious or ethnic difference for that matter. And I think it requires an honest conversation. You've just made the point about religious groups. One of our research on youth vulnerability and exclusion found that the same communities, the same groups that serve as an alternative to the state, because the state is absent in our lives, will invariably be the ones who reshape our mental models in a way that underscores inequality when it comes to questions of gender. The same thing applies to gender-based violence. One of our colleagues from another part of West Africa, and I'm not going to say where, so I don't want to put anyone on the spot, once said, look, quite honestly, was telling a group of us, we were not raised to think that, I was not raised to think that women were equal in that sense. He has had to learn that over time. I thought that was a really honest conversation. And I think it's important as we envision the future and we envision that future where we are equal citizens, that we begin to put in place mechanisms that allow us to see that equality before anything else. And this is where I think the next generation and social media, which is right there, can also serve some social good. And actually it does both. It really, really churns people, annoys people, but actually it's something that can be used to begin to drive things forward very quickly, because I want to turn to our governors as well. Now, we have people who are talking about, so we are talking about conflict and peace building in the North. I'm not hearing about what new ideas we want to profile to move the region out of its historical challenges. So the question of historical challenges is one that is emerging. But someone is also asking, I believe that's Akimbodi, whose peace are we talking about for the future? If it could be argued that some people in Nigeria have never known peace in their lives, whose peace is important here, and what will its future look like? It's worth reflecting on all of this. But for our governors in particular, one of the questions earlier, I'd like that to be borne in mind. But I think the governor of Sokoto might be able to respond to this a little bit. The governors of the northern states should move away from relying on federal government to respond to violence. And I think that this is these things are shifting as I'm talking, should move away from relying on federal government to respond to violence. They should focus on entrenching a culture of peace in their states, empower the citizens, and address impunity to ensure accountability for all. But the question of relying on the federal government for violence, and approaching this through violence is a very complex one, and it requires that as we envision the future, that this is one that struck a chord earlier as well, the over-reliance on military response. It struck a chord that we're envisioning a future that we should, that does not involve the use of violence in the everyday. I think that will be really interesting. I want to begin to wrap up and just ask that we offer general comments in response to some of the questions that we've had. Shall I turn to one of our governors first? Is the governor of Sokoto? Is the governor of Sokoto State still there?
Very well, Fumi, I'm here.
Yes, please.
I've been following you all through. all of the interventions from my colleague, Kayode Fayemi, from Professor Osage, Fakria and Titi, and the host of others who contributed very, very richly to this conversation. So I couldn't go away. I've been glued to my seat and listening attentively. And I must agree with a number of issues raised and propositions made as how we can envision peace in the future. But to further support all of what has been said so far, we must, as leaders, ensure that we see, envision the future depending on how we continue to engage our youth, depending on how we engage our women inclusion, youth inclusion, in terms of bringing them close, face to face with the realities of governance, not only by way of appointing them, but giving them tasks, specific tasks, very difficult tasks to come up with solutions to, and of course, and support them and mentor them and share experiences with them. That is very, very important, especially when you are looking and talking about the future. Of course, how we address the issue of poverty level today will also really shape up the future of our country. How we build institutions rather than individuals also will help in addressing the future of our country and the peace of our country, and of course finding and evolving common ground on most of the topical and contentious issues of today. Consensus building is also key and very fundamental. But specific to the issue of gender-based violence, the legislation, the law on gender-based violence, in Sokoto State, we have gone far. The Assembly, State House of Assembly has done public hearing, and they have done the validation conference. So we're only waiting for them to actually pass it into law. We're actually at the last lap of it being passed by the Assembly, and I'm willing and ready the day it is passed for me to assent to it, for it to become part of our laws in the state. So on security vote and peace votes, I believe that, speaking for myself, and I believe quite a number of governors, we have been using what is available as security vote. Speaking for myself, I know that it's not quite much. In Sokoto State monthly, how much is even the income of the state, not to talk of what you can devote as security votes to the governor, when you are talking about security and the much we are committing in supporting the security agencies of the federal government in our states. We have been using security vote for peace. In terms of facilitating roundtable conversations, engagements, discussions, dialogue with contending and different interest groups, it's part of what we use to bring about people to a roundtable discussion and conversation. The most recent one we had in Sokoto was the roundtable discussions we have had, organized by the local chapter of the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies on security, and we were able to come up with the solutions, and we are following bit by bit those recommendations of that summit, which was piloted by alumnus of the NIPS in Sokoto State. So we are using the security vote for peace. Not necessarily just giving the monies all to the security agencies, but also using it to reach out to vulnerable groups that need help and that are in their need of support. So it's work in progress for all of us as governors. We cannot do it all at the same time, but I assure you that we are doing our best in Sokoto State to support our youth in terms of empowerment. And the best way to empower the youth is in their education. education, education, education. And in Sokoto State, since we came in for the last 6 years, the education sector of the state has always been having the number one and the highest allocation from our budgetary provisions in the state. 23% of the budget sometimes, upwards of to 25% of the budget sometimes goes to education sector of the state. And we are committed in sponsoring our student, our youth who are in virtual in tertiary institutions. You know, we're very backward in terms of educational, Western education and so forth. So we are doing even as mundane things as giving scholarship, even to local students who are going to tertiary institutions within Nigeria and those without Nigeria. And we're building schools, we're bringing in recruiting teachers. Recently, we recruited 2,000 teachers to add up to the number of teachers we have in the state. And we're still giving students books, writing materials, and training and retraining of teachers, and all of that. And the school infrastructure is being robustly refurbished, and many new ones are being built. All of these are for the youth. And most importantly, and more importantly, I'm sure Titi will be very glad to hear this, and Fakria, we are having in Sokoto State, established by my administration, an agency for girl child education, the first around our region, and is being headed by Aisha Maina and Dr. Yusuf Amamut, who are seasoned administrators, who are educationists, and who know and understand the issues. And they are busy supporting our girls and bringing them mainstreaming them into school system and retaining them. And we are building, as we speak, 3 girls' science academies, 1 in each of the secondary districts. Each of these boarding houses will contain no less than 3,000 girls. And all of these colleges, how I wish any of you can visit Sokoto soon, you will see the Girls Science Academy we are building in the metropolis of Sokoto. And it has gotten to a starting stage. The intention is that we recruit some of the best of our girls from as soon as they graduate from their JSS 3 into SS1, SS2, SS3 of this institution, which will now serve as a feeding and training ground for our universities, for our tertiary institutions in the state. We are committed. We're also, of course, doing a lot of cash transfers to instead of allowing our girls to be hawking, we support their mothers. If you have a girl child that you accept to go to school, if you have 2, we do for 2. If you have 3, we'll give you for 3. If you have 4 girls that you accept to allow them to go to school and be retained in school, we support you for the 4 girls so that you don't, at the end of the day, use them for hawking. So we are doing quite a lot of investments in human capital development of our youth generally, and specifically at the girl child in Sokoto State. So that is the way to go, looking at the future. The only way to go looking at the future is to ensure that the youth are educated and they are better prepared for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Governor. Before you go, maybe this is something to reflect on. I mean, you don't have to maybe respond straight away anymore, but just wanted to highlight this as I know we're running out of time. There's a question that says out of 19 states in the north, only 3 states, Plateau, Kaduna, and Adamawa, have created institutional mechanisms, peace agencies and commissions to respond to conflicts. What about the other 16 states when all the states are in crisis? This is a question to reflect on. And because we're running out of time, if you had a sentence response, then okay. If you want to reflect on it and you send a text in the margins or send us something to share in our conference tomorrow, that's also fine. Yeah.
I think I'll take that as part of my takeaways from this in conversation.
Fantastic. I want to really thank you for your very frank and honest discussion with us and for all the information you provided. I don't take it for granted that you've made the time to be with us this afternoon. Thank you so very much. Thanks, Governor.
Thank you very much.
Great. What I'd like to do is now ask for brief statements because I'd want Governor Fayemi to offer closing remarks. We have 7 minutes to go. I'll ask Fakria, give me a minute of a closing statement that encompasses what you think about that vision of peace for the future, having heard the much that you have heard. I hope you had access to the Q&A as well. We'll take some of this forward to our conference tomorrow. So whoever has asked any questions, don't think that those questions are in vain. We'll continue with the conversation tomorrow. Thank you. Fakria.
Yeah, so to just close, I would like to say that the future of peace is very much contingent on a future of leadership that is inclusive, that is forward-thinking. And also the future of peace would really require a transformation from the current status quo of state responsiveness to critical issues, one that doesn't deflect on existential crises just to protect itself or its reputation, that really doesn't prioritize plain politics with human lives, but also is very much investing in marginalized communities. And in the case of Nigeria, the majority of the population is really marginalized. So essentially, we require, leadership that prioritizes the restoration of human dignity and justice, not just for post-conflict communities, but those that have long been alienated from, accessing the many elements of governance, and especially for young people, opportunities for enterprise and a space to, manifest innovative solutions that allows us to foster, to grow and actually be competitive on the global stage. So thank you.
Thank you, Fakria. Thank you so much. To be continued. Thanks. Titi, 1 minute, literally. I know you gave us a lot of food for thought in your last response.
Thank you, Prof. I would like to pick up on what Governor Tambuwal said in 2 respects. One with regard to nurturing future leaders of peace. And I think that really this has to start at the youngest level, so that the children who are growing up now grow up recalling what you said about the gentleman who said he wasn't raised thinking women were equal, so that we change the ideas right from the ground up, so that this next generation then grows up and it becomes a normal thing for them. But also I would like to see more support for young women's and young feminist movements, because, and this is the kind of work that Fakria is doing, which is so vital. This is one of the forces of resistance that is going to help to keep pushing the boundaries and changing the narratives. Thank you.
Titi, thank you so much. Thanks for that response. I think spot on for connecting, the governor, Fakria. And without further ado, let me hand over to Governor Kayode Fayemi to offer us some closing comments, please.
Well, thank you very much for me. It's been an interesting conversation with all of our panelists, and I think it's a going concern. I'm sure it's not going to finish here, but let me say, having listened to yourself, Titi, Fakria, and my brother, Governor Tambuwal, that even as governors, we need these insights from people who are on the field engaging with issues of peace. Wearing my academic hat, I remember reading years ago from the father of peace in academic circles, Joan Galtung, about 3 aspects of peace. Peace as end of conflict, which was what Egosa referred to as not being complete peace, or it's actually what Galtung describes as negative peace, and peace as harmonious relationship, which is in the field referred to as positive peace, and then peace as justice, peace as equity, structural peace, which is really what I believe we need to fundamentally move towards in order to address the whole array of issues relating to peace of the future. And in doing this, I don't think we can run away from getting away from the notions of otherness, which is so dominant in our societies. We always have to create the other or look at the other, and that's what results in ethnic profiling. And we have seen the results of that profiling in majority of our conflicts, whether it's the Hutu, Tutsi, genocide, or even nearer home in our own setting now, when you hear people talk, the violent Fulani herder, as though you can isolate every herder must be a criminal and must be violent. That's the notion that we're grappling with, even in our own setting in Nigeria. And I think we need to focus. It's probably one of the most dangerous issues that must be addressed in order to really move in the direction of our future peace. How do we deal with this without necessarily isolating ourselves from issues of criminal justice? What sort of reaction must we have? Restorative or retributory justice in dealing with coming to terms with notions of peace. I also think one of the challenges we must grapple with is the deteriorating social capital in the local setting in Africa, at least. Some of the ways we've addressed these issues through town hall meetings, village square meetings, that do not allow for things to degenerate. There must be ways of returning to those areas, but institutionalizing them. I think Gachacha tried to do that in Rwanda post-genocide, with all of the challenges that came with that. And in many of our customary settings as well, or palace court settings in the continent, we also see how this play out. But I think we're doing a lot more than Titi was able to acknowledge, and I'm glad that Governor Tambuwal spoke about steps being taken in Sokoto State. I can assure you that as governors, the issue of gender justice is one that is very prominent on the agenda for us. June last year, we declared a state of emergency on gender-based violence as governors in the 36 states in Nigeria, because we see this as an issue that has come to the fore in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, and one that we needed to really step up to the plate and address fundamentally. And between then and now, you were talking about the VAP Act. We've had 17 more states that have signed up to the VAP Act. But that's just the law. I agree that the law in itself may not be the ultimate solution, but it's a recognition that there's a problem and a determination to respond to the problem. But we then need to couple it with more realistic initiatives. Again, I'm glad that Governor Tambuwal talked about that. I mean, you can talk about the law until you're blue in the face. You can also talk about enforcement of Child Rights Act or Violence Against Person Prohibition Act. If you do not accompany it with empowering strategies, it's no use telling a mother to get a child to school if that child is a means of empowerment through the hawking that she does for the family to eat. So there has to be a mechanism in place that you must use in order to support the family that will then encourage the mother to see alternatives to preventing that child to go to school. So ultimately, education has to be a part of it. But if we're envisioning the future of peace, we must also envision the future of the post-Westphalian state. If we
seem to have lost connection. We seem to have lost connection with Governor Fayemi. I will see whether he returns shortly. But in the meantime, I had some 3 comments to close with. And those of you who have access to this, these are some of the things we'll discuss tomorrow. This Q&A gem of questions, questions that are a real gem in that sense. One by Damilola Adegoke talked about the ontology of the future of peace. How do we construct peace for a future that we're not going to be a part of? Do you all still hear me? Yes. How do we construct a peace for a future that we're not going to be part of? Are we going to be forecasting a future using values, limitations, and challenges of today? Will peace be peace as we know it now in the future? I want to leave us with that as one of the first set of comments to reflect on tomorrow. Will peace be peace as we know it now in the future? Very profound. Adedeji Ebo, are the rights and responsibilities of citizens commonly agreed or even applied? Because he's saying peace would require an organic social contract and inclusivity is key. There's a last thought I want to leave us with, and my sincere apologies for those who haven't heard me read out the questions. But someone called Babatunde had a number of insightful questions here. And I think the notion of peace, we need to pay attention to the notion of peace, and it goes beyond the absence of conflict, which is what Governor Fayemi was alluding to there. He already gave us some very interesting conclusions, and that of the Westphalian state that we have to depart from goes to the heart of the question. Well, great. I'm glad, UK, I was just talking. So why don't you close with us as you were talking about the Westphalian state? And I was just about to say that you connected with the very first question that was asked around how the state will evolve. So over to you as you have the last words, please.
Well, really, I thought I should just highlight those points. You academics can tease it out for us and help us build a framework for a future of peace and the responsibility that we have as leaders to protect citizens and our people.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Excellencies. We have had a real...
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. And without further ado, with us this afternoon. See you again for those who are attending the conference tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, bye.